This is the third Sunday in Advent. I was in my third year of divinity school before I learned what Advent actually means. Maybe that's because we didn't make a very big deal of it in the church where I grew up. Or maybe I just wasn't really paying attention, distracted as I was by the Advent calendars with their little paper doors that open up to reveal a chocolate. I know I'm not alone, though. For most of us, I think Advent is little more than a quiet hum in the background of December's hustle and bustle. An unintrusive, probably unimpressive prelude to the big event, Christmas. Advent means coming or arrival. Beginning on the fourth Sunday before Christmas, Advent is the season of expectation. In the Unitarian Universalist tradition, we think of it as waiting for the light to be reborn in the dark of winter. And if we forget for a moment all of the religious dogma that has complicated our collective memory of what his life means, light out of the darkness is an apt metaphor for Jesus. Now we know that historically speaking, he probably was not born on December 25th or even in the winter. The Bible seems to indicate he was born in the fall. But Christmas takes place around the time of the winter solstice because that's when pagans celebrated a major holiday, complete with Yule logs and Christmas trees, and it had to be replaced in order for us to convert them. I say us because Unitarian Universalism came out of the Christian tradition. It has evolved to the point of no longer being considered a Christian denomination, but before our religious ancestors decided that the simple religion of Jesus was more important than the complicated religion about them, they too were a part of a movement that spread the Christian empire around the world and squashed out native traditions by overlaying Christianity on their liturgical calendars and putting a Trinity and the Blessed Virgin Mary in the place of their gods and goddesses. Hence, Christmas in the winter, and hence our right to take Christmas and Advent and discern for ourselves what it might mean to us. Let's back up. Where are we? Between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Poised between gratitude and expectation. Poised also on these seats, somewhere in the middle of the spinning of our weeks, somewhere in the middle, or if not the middle, I would hope at least in the midst of our lives. And what does it mean for our lives to be poised here in Advent with our gratitude and our expectation? What is the relationship between the two? In the United States, Advent and Christmas come after Thanksgiving, gratitude and then expectation. It seems like they're in backwards order. In regular life, aren't we usually grateful after we get something, after what we expected has happened? Seems like it, but then thinking about this peculiar order reminded me that the two actually are not so easily organized. We may expect something and then feel grateful. We may have the mindfulness to be grateful for our expectations in and of themselves, grounded, as they often are, in hope. Or if we're really good, we might have an attitude of gratitude outside of our expectations, an ongoing practice of naming and giving thanks for all that is good or fruitful in our lives. On the other hand, expectations can also sneak up on us, going unrecognized until they're unmet, and we feel frustrated or offended. Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever found yourself feeling cranky or disappointed in your mother or your spouse or your friend because of an expectation that you had that neither you nor they were aware of? Yeah? Maybe right now you have a sense of what the holidays should be like, and maybe your family has another idea. You'll need to listen to each other with love. You'll need to approach the holidays with Yuletide agility. Yuletide agility. I just made that up, but I'm going to say it like I pulled it out of the Encyclopedia of Psychotherapy. It's the ability to switch gears quickly when your vision does not line up with the reality of your family. Yuletide agility. And then, of course, there are times when the unexpected brings us to gratitude or even amazement. I've got a story about that, a piece of my personal story that relates very much to what we do here. And it starts out kind of sad, but bear with me, it gets better. When I was a teenager, about 15 years old, my family hit some really hard times. My parents' marriage ended. My grandmother, who always used to take me and my sister to the beach, and who called me a dirty dog once when I beat her at a game of cards, was very sick. She was nearing the end of her days. My dad was sent away to the Middle East for the first Gulf War, Desert Storm. And around the same time he left, my mother and my sister and I left our small town and our house, and we moved an hour away to an apartment near downtown Portland, Oregon. What I remember most about that little basement apartment we had is that it had really dingy cement walls and huge pipes running across the ceiling, and the windows had black metal security bars on them. I thought it looked like a jail. And finally, my mother and my sister and I didn't have enough money to get by very well, and we had to depend on various kinds of public assistance. If you've ever been on public assistance, you know that it's not a great way to live. You spend a lot of time waiting in lines, answering intrusive questions, filling out paperwork, and trying to understand the complicated rules. You don't live comfortably on the help you get, and that's for sure. And if, in your longing to rebel against this reality, you spend some of your food stamps on shrimp with cocktail sauce, or a $6 container of baba ganoush, the people in line at the checkout will not think well of you. It's a downer. Even though you'll never forget what a blessing it is to live in a country that helps its poor, and you may look all your life for ways to pay it forward. I would like to say that we banded together with an attitude of gratitude in the weeks before Christmas that year, and that we counted the blessings we did have. After all, the three of us were together. At least we had a place to live. Our apartment might not have been pretty, but it was warm. And some of our neighbors were really nice. They came up with the great idea of leaving unwanted clothing in a special basket in the laundry room so we could all trade with each other, and that was fun. I was blessed with the time to say goodbye to my grandmother. Not everybody is so lucky. And even though my dad was going away to a war, at least for that moment, he did not seem to be in grave danger. But I had a hard time focusing on the good things. I was not grateful at all. My expectations were not good that year, and I remember that even though I knew I should be grateful, I was disappointed. It was going to be what my friend Donna calls a good old socks and underwear kind of Christmas, where if you get any presents, they're not going to be so great. They're going to be socks and underwear, simple things that we needed. Nothing very exciting. Now, Christmas is not all about presents, but let's face it, they're right up there on the list of favorite things. There's even a song about it. Julie Andrews sang it, and she seems very virtuous. I was dreading Christmas that year. And you know, that happens. I mentioned that expectations can be grounded in hope, but sometimes holiday expectations are not hopeful. If you are sick or have recently received a scary diagnosis, you might not be feeling so cheerful. If you're missing a loved one who's overseas, or worse, who has died, the absence of that person might be a tangible reality for you, a loved one-shaped hole in your life. If you are lonely, or if you've lost your job, or you're going through a separation or a divorce, or struggling with addiction, or just not feeling good about yourself, for whatever reason, your expectations for Christmas may be dreary. And I'm sure that just as there are folks here today who are very excited about the holiday, who are sad, and some who are both happy and sad, if someone you love is having a sad Christmas, you might feel sad too, even though you're hopeful at the same time. It happens. But then things that you don't expect can happen too. And when your expectations are very low, this can be a really good thing. On that Christmas morning, years ago when I was feeling so hopeless, my sister and I woke up to the sound of exclamations coming from the hall outside our door. It was our mother's voice, and she was very excited about something out there. We climbed out of bed to see what was happening, and there she was, standing in the hallway outside our front door in her pajamas, and next to her, to our surprise, was a huge pile of presents. When I called my mom and told her I'd be sharing this story, she reminded me that there were 52 of them. It was unbelievable. Someone had left them in the early morning hours, presents picked out for each of us with our names on them. There were blankets, sweaters, makeup, slippers, chocolates. I don't remember what else. I do remember insisting that my mother must have known who left them. To this day, she swears that she doesn't know. It's been 20 years, and I'm starting to believe her. My hunch is that it was either somebody from First Unitarian Church of Portland, where we were members, or Santa. What I did know was that we weren't as alone in the city as we thought. We had presents, sure, but even better, really, was the fact that somebody was looking out for us. Maybe somebody I had never even noticed was near. That Christmas, well, I worried that I didn't have enough hopeful spirit to hold up all the time of ceremonies and tradition. It turned out that somebody else had brought enough to carry us through, and that somebody had reached out and touched us with it. Against the darkness winter brings, we bring our light, shining like the Advent star, to guard against the longest night. That little rhyme, too, says something of our deep down expectations that darkness is inevitable. And surely we each know the way that looks in the private corners of our lives. There are times when we aren't sure how to uncover our own light, aren't even sure there's still a light to be lit by Advent. Our personal winters can be so cold. And there are times when the light shines brightly, easily, as bold as the Advent star itself, when gratitude is the product of our joy far more than spiritual discipline. The standout word then is we. We bring our light. It takes folks in all places in life to make up a we that can bring light against the darkness, a light whose reach extends beyond the joyful hearts to touch the troubled ones too. We can't take away another person's trouble or sadness any more than that mysterious gift giver could solve my family's hard times. But what we can offer one another is the light that never goes out because it's passed from person to person. You don't have to worry if you can't see it all the time. We can tell each other, because I've got it for you. In Gail Godwin's novel, Evensong, the fictional minister Margaret also delivers an Advent sermon on the topic of sharing the light, and she does something gutsy. She has a young lay leader read through the entire genealogy of Jesus as it's written in the Gospels. You might know this as the list of begats that accumulates in length throughout the Bible. In the beginning, we have Adam and Eve begetting Cain and Abel and Seth. But by the time we get to the Gospel of Matthew, it's developed into a list that takes over 3 minutes to read out loud. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. Jacob was the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah was the father of Perez and Dirah by Tamar. Perez was the father of Hezron. I'm not going to read the whole 3-minute list. Hezron was the father of Aram. Aram was the father of Amminadab. Amminadab was the father of Nahshon. Nahshon was the father of Salmon. Salmon was the father of Boaz by Rahab. In the story, the congregation is put off by this long reading, but they're at least sympathetic to the lay leader. Jan, you can thank me later for not assigning that one. If the minister had tried to do this herself, she thinks there would have been raised eyebrows before Perez and a silent mutiny before Boaz. 3 minutes later, when the genealogy is finished, she begins to preach. She wonders aloud about the differences between the stories of Jesus' birth in the Gospels. If you've never read them, or if it's been a long time, you might be surprised to know that there are 2 different birth narratives in them and that they disagree with each other. In one, Jesus is born in a cave. In the other, a stable. One gospel suggests his parents traveled to Bethlehem for the census, and in the other, he already lived there. In one account, the nefarious King Herod learns of Jesus' birth and demands that all boy babies be killed, and Jesus' parents flee with him. In another, there's no mention of Herod at all, and they go peacefully to Nazareth. Conservative scholars have been trying to reconcile these for years, but maybe, Godwin's minister says, maybe there's no point in trying to reconcile what were not historical documents. Many real-life Christian ministers agree with her. It seems futile, maybe even dangerous, to try to pull a specific literal theology out of stories that were handed down orally for so long, selected from among so many other differing versions, and then compiled into a canon that has not only been translated from its original language, but also across cultures and generations. Each generation's culture and interpretation influences the next unconsciously. Godwin's fictional minister then quotes the real-world biblical scholar, Raymond Brown, a Roman Catholic priest. We've moved from reality to fiction, back to reality. Raymond Brown argues that the essential theology of the Gospels is revealed in that genealogy. Just look at who we have on the list, he says. Abraham, who unfairly banished his older son, Ishmael. Jacob, who tricked his hungry brother out of his birthright. Judah and Tamar, who produced offspring when she tricked him by disguising herself as a prostitute, and he went for it. Rahab, a real prostitute. A great many people on the list are remembered for their mistakes and their ethical lapses or their poor reputation in society, as much as any other characteristic they might have. According to this ancient theology, then, says Brown, God does not always call upon perfect people to do divine work in this world. Even the mother of Jesus had scandal attached to her, conceived as he was out of wedlock. This motley crew is the source of Jesus, who is called the light of the world. If we accept that our ancestors who kept these ancient stories alive for generations had wisdom and worthwhile meaning to impart to us, even as people gravely misunderstand the form in which we receive it, what is the lesson of the genealogy? Out of the lives of imperfect people, light is born. And though our worlds may sometimes feel small, our individual lives are part of a larger story. They have meaning beyond what we can even begin to imagine if we would just open ourselves up to discovering what it might be. Here is my expectation and my deepest hope now, that this winter, whether you are a newcomer or a longtime member or somewhere in between, that you find in this church a place to bring your whole heart, with all of its expectations, joy, gratitude, and even its pain and longing. And that you find the courage to slow down and discover what meaning your life might have that you have not yet even dreamed. And that you will be touched by the light of the world as it shines in you and in all of us. Happy Advent. Please join me in singing our closing hymn, People Look East.